What if I told you that the salad you eat for your health could actually be doing more damage to your body than a shot of vodka? Sounds like total nonsense, right? We're used to seeing the world in black and white. Vegetables are inherently good, and alcohol is 100% evil. But the world is far more complex than we imagine. Today, we're going to launch a major sabotage mission into the world of healthy eating. I'm going to name 3 common vegetables sitting on the shelves of every grocery store, and likely in most of your refrigerators right now. And I will prove that, under certain conditions, these can be more insidious and dangerous for your body than a moderate amount of alcohol. Are you ready to question everything you thought you knew about healthy living? Then brace yourselves, because after this video, your trips to the grocery store will never be the same. And yes, I can already anticipate the angry comments, so watch until the end before jumping to conclusions. First, let's establish some context. In the 21st century, healthy living, or the wellness movement, has become a full-blown religion. We are constantly bombarded with mantras. Eat more vegetables. 5 servings a day is the law. Vegetables are the ultimate source of vitamins and fiber, and generally that advice holds true. But in this rush for clean eating, we miss the devil, and as we know, the devil is in the details. We've stopped asking questions. Which vegetable? How was it grown? How was it prepared? We've created a cult where anything pulled from the ground is automatically considered sacred. Alcohol, conversely, has been cast as the main villain. Its harm to the liver, brain, and the entire body when abused is undeniable. But here's the paradox. The damage from alcohol is at least well-studied and predictable. We know the dosages, the consequences, the mechanisms. The harm from certain healthy foods, however, operates silently, stealthily, disguised as wellness. It doesn't strike as obviously, but it's often far more insidious, triggering chronic inflammation, autoimmune reactions, and metabolic disruptions that people struggle to diagnose for years, all while continuing to dutifully eat their healthy little salads. Let's start with our first suspect. Meet the undisputed king of the dinner table, often called the second bread, the foundation of countless meals, the humble potato. That's right, the one food staple no family dinner is complete without. We love it. Mashed, fried, boiled, baked, or roasted. It's cheap, filling, and seems totally harmless, right? After all, it's just a vegetable. But we need to look closer at what's happening inside. The main issue with the potato is its incredibly high glycemic index. When it enters our system, especially in the form of creamy mash or crispy fries, that potato starch breaks down into glucose at lightning speed. For your pancreas, a bowl of mashed potatoes is essentially the same as eating several spoonfuls of pure sugar. This triggers a massive release, a huge spike of insulin, desperately trying to manage all that excess glucose. Think of it as a blood sugar roller coaster that you put your body on every time you eat potatoes. You get a sharp, sudden climb in sugar, followed by an equally dramatic crash. And what do you feel right after that crash? That's right, more hunger and crushing fatigue. Now let's contrast this effect with what happens when you consume a modest amount of high-quality dry wine or a clean, pure spirit. Alcohol certainly puts a strain on the liver, but it doesn't trigger the same wild, immediate blood sugar spike. Its metabolism is far more predictable and doesn't aggressively disrupt our insulin system. So, What's the outcome of regularly consuming potatoes? These constant insulin roller coasters eventually cause your cells to become desensitized. This is insulin resistance, a direct highway to type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and chronic inflammation. You might go years without touching a drop of alcohol, yet regularly bombard your pancreas with potatoes, ultimately leading to metabolic syndrome. It turns out that, in the long run, for your overall metabolism, potatoes can be a far more destructive enemy than that evening glass of wine. We often worry about cirrhosis of the liver from alcohol, but completely ignore the significant risk of diabetes posed by this seemingly innocent side dish. But wait, there's more. The real danger begins when we decide to make our potatoes extra delicious. For example, by frying them until they achieve that golden brown crust, or baking them in the oven at a high temperature. At this very moment, a genuine monster named acrylamide is born inside this otherwise innocent vegetable. This chemical compound is formed as a result of a reaction between sugars and the amino acid asparagine, occurring when temperatures exceed 120 degrees Celsius. Simply put, that appetizing crispy crust on your French fries or potato chips is pure acrylamide. And here's the unpleasant truth. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies acrylamide as a probable human carcinogen. Animal studies have shown a clear link between the consumption of acrylamide and the development of certain cancers, while the exact safe dosages for humans are still being researched. The mere fact that a potential carcinogen could be sitting on your plate should certainly give you pause. Let's go back to the alcohol parallel. It's a proven fact that excessive alcohol consumption raises the risk of certain cancers. But with potatoes, we incur this same risk from a product we view as a true staple, an everyday item, even a diet food. We feed fried potatoes to our kids, eat them several times a week ourselves, completely oblivious that we are voluntarily loading our bodies with a potential carcinogen. The situation is truly paradoxical. A person might proudly abstain from drinking, yet their diet, rich in fried potatoes, could pose equal, or even more insidious, cancer risks. The insidiousness here is that the danger is disguised as something completely commonplace and seemingly beneficial. It's like a sweet-tasting poison that we simply can't resist. The perfect illustration would be a comparative image. On one side, a shot glass of vodka, on the other a mountain of French fries, with the simple caption underneath, "Choose your poison." But what about the vitamins? You might ask. We've always been told the potatoes are loaded with potassium and vitamin C. That's partially true, but let's be brutally honest here. To get a meaningful amount of vitamin C, you'd have to consume an enormous quantity of potatoes, and along with that, a massive hit of starch. Plus, most of that vitamin C is destroyed during the cooking process anyway. So pinning your hopes on potatoes as a primary source of ascorbic acid is simply fooling yourself. Potassium? Sure, it's present, but you can obtain that exact mineral from dozens of other, much safer sources. Avocados, spinach, bananas, and legumes, just to name a few. By choosing a potato just for the potassium, you get the double whammy of dramatic blood sugar spikes and potential carcinogens as a side effect. That's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The supposed benefits simply don't justify the potential harm. At least nobody tries to market alcohol as a source of vitamins. Alcohol is honest, It's a toxin you consume for relaxation. But the potato, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, pretending to be your healthy friend. So, what's the solution? Do we have to give up our favorite vegetable entirely? Not necessarily. First, it's important to realize that the most damaging forms of potatoes are those cooked at high heat or mashed. If you occasionally eat potatoes boiled in their skins and then cooled, some of the starch converts into what's known as resistant starch. This form doesn't spike your blood sugar as drastically, and it actually serves as food for beneficial gut bacteria. In other words, a cold potato salad is the lesser of two evils. Second, there are some excellent alternatives available. For instance, the sweet potato. Despite the name, it has a lower glycemic index and offers far more nutritional benefits, particularly beta-carotene. A great substitute for mashed potatoes is cauliflower mash. It's very similar in taste and texture, but without the starch. Instead of traditional fried potatoes, you can use celeriac root or Jerusalem artichokes. The main takeaway is to recognize the issue and stop treating potatoes as a mandatory, everyday staple that is completely safe. Moving on to the second contender on our list. Golden, juicy, and sweet corn. Especially in the summer, a boiled cob is the very taste of childhood. And what about popcorn at the movies? Or the canned corn we throw into our salads? It seems harmless. What could possibly be wrong with this sunny staple? But we are about to run into several unpleasant surprises. Surprise number one. From a purely botanical perspective, corn isn't a vegetable at all. It's a grain. This means we need to treat it like any other grain, with all the associated health implications. Like potatoes, it's loaded with starch and sugars. But corn holds a specific potent ace up its sleeve that makes it even more insidious. We're talking about fructose. Modern hybrid corn varieties are bred with a single goal: maximum sweetness. And that sweetness comes from its extremely high fructose content, especially when it's processed into that infamous corn syrup, which is now injected into almost every industrial product, from sodas to ketchup. This is where things get really interesting. What exactly makes fructose so dangerous? After all, it's just fruit sugar, right? The problem lies in how our bodies process it. While almost every cell in our body can use glucose for energy, the metabolism of fructose happens almost exclusively in the liver. And guess what other substance is metabolized in the exact same way, placing that same intense burden squarely on the liver? You guessed it. Alcohol. When you consume large amounts of corn or products containing corn syrup, you force your liver into overdrive, aggressively converting that fructose straight into fat. This process is virtually identical to what happens in the liver when you drink heavily. The result is a condition doctors call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. That means you can be a total teetotaler, never touching a drop, but your liver will suffer as if you were a regular heavy drinker. That's pretty ironic, isn't it? The damage from a glass of wine is at least obvious, but the harm caused by a can of preserved corn in an otherwise healthy salad, that's the real sneak attack. To make matters worse, corn is the king of genetic modification. Estimates suggest that up to 90% of all corn grown globally is genetically modified. I won't get bogged down in the direct debate over GMO harm to humans right now. That is a massive subject for another conversation. Instead, Let's look at the problem from a different angle. GMO corn is specifically engineered to be resistant to certain herbicides, particularly glyphosate. This allows farmers to literally drench their fields in this chemical, wiping out all the weeds. Consequently, the product that eventually makes it to our dinner table may contain residual amounts of this substance. The World Health Organization has classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans. That's the same concerning classification we saw with acrylamide. So, with every ear of corn, we risk not only a massive sugar hit to the liver, but also a dose of potentially dangerous chemistry. Compare that to enjoying a glass of good wine, produced using traditional methods. Suddenly the choice seems far less clear-cut. Another crucial aspect that often goes unmentioned is how corn influences inflammation in the body. Corn, particularly corn oil, is incredibly rich in omega-6 fatty acids. We certainly need these acids for health, but the key factor is their balance with omega-3 fatty acids, which have potent anti-inflammatory effects. In an ideal, health-conscious diet, that ratio should be roughly 1:1, or at most 4:1 in favor of omega-6. However, the modern diet is saturated with corn oil, processed foods, and meat from corn-fed animals. This has drastically skewed the balance to 20:1, and often higher. This severe imbalance creates a constant low-grade pro-inflammatory background in the body. Think of it like a smoldering fire or a persistent tinderbox, ready to flare up at any moment as arthritis, heart disease, skin conditions, or even depression. Alcohol can certainly trigger inflammation, but its effect is usually acute and direct. Corn, however, generates a chronic, slow-moving problem, a systemic issue that is incredibly difficult to trace back to one single dietary source. The greatest danger of corn isn't just its content, it's its sheer ubiquity. While a potato is obvious, corn hides behind dozens of different aliases. Corn syrup, corn starch, maltodextrin, dextrose, xanthan gum, all of these are common corn derivatives. Pick up a package of almost any sauce, yogurt, sausage, bread, or baby food, and chances are you'll find one of these disguised agents lurking inside. We consume massive amounts of corn without even realizing it. We believe we are eating tomato ketchup, but we are often consuming flavored and colored corn syrup. We buy low-fat yogurt, completely missing the fact that cornstarch was added for texture and thickness. This stealth invasion makes corn a far more dangerous enemy than substances like alcohol, whose consumption we can at least monitor and consciously control. We know when we're drinking wine, but we almost never know when we are eating corn. And the enemy you cannot see is always the most lethal. Just like with potatoes, completely cutting out corn might seem like a radical step for many people. So, what can you do? First, start reading labels. Avoid products containing high fructose corn syrup, HFCS, and modified corn starch. Secondly, if you genuinely enjoy corn, make an effort to choose organic varieties that have not been treated with glyphosate. The ideal option is old, non-hybrid heirloom corn, which you can sometimes find directly from local farmers. Third, remember that corn is technically a grain, not a vegetable. Treat it as a side dish or a garnish, not the foundation of your meal. You shouldn't use it to replace other genuinely beneficial vegetables. And of course, skip the popcorn, which is often popped in cheap oils and drenched in artificial flavorings. You're much better off having a handful of nuts. The health benefits are incomparable. Awareness and mindfulness are our key tools in combating hidden threats in our food supply. And finally, the third count of our indictment. This time, we're putting an entire family of plants on trial. Plants we adore for their vibrant colors and flavors, the nightshades. The main culprits from this group on our dinner plates are tomatoes, eggplants, bell peppers, and yes, the already mentioned potato. That's right, the potato is back. It's a repeat offender. So, what unites these seemingly disparate and, visually speaking, very healthy foods? They are all linked by the presence of specific protective proteins called lectins. Plants are far from the defenseless creatures we often assume they are. Since they can't run away from predators, they've evolved an entire arsenal of chemical warfare to protect themselves and their seeds from being eaten. Lectins are one type of this defense mechanism. These are sticky proteins designed specifically to cause digestive issues in whoever consumes them. And while we humans have learned to digest them better than, say, an insect, for many of us, lectins still pose a significant problem. How exactly do lectins operate? Once they reach our gut, they can bind to the cells lining the intestinal wall. Think of them like a burr clinging to your clothing. That's essentially how lectins latch onto our intestinal lining. For people with sensitive digestion or existing underlying issues, this binding action can start to damage the gut barrier. This creates a condition commonly referred to as leaky gut syndrome. While not a formal medical diagnosis, it describes a process where microscopic openings or gaps form in the intestinal wall. These openings allow undigested food particles, bacteria, and toxins, things that absolutely do not belong, to pass directly into the bloodstream. Our immune system naturally detects these intruders, immediately raises the alarm, and launches an attack. This is the onset of systemic inflammation, and that, right there, is the root of many chronic problems that people blame on everything else but their favorite tomato salad. This is where things get both interesting and dangerous. When the immune system is in a state of constant readiness, or battle mode, due to a leaky gut, it becomes prone to errors. Some of the proteins that leak into the bloodstream have structures similar to the proteins in our own tissues, for example, those found in our joints, thyroid, or skin. The immune system, attempting to destroy the enemy proteins, mistakenly turns its attack inward. This process is known as an autoimmune reaction. This is precisely why many integrative medicine practitioners link high consumption of nightshades to flare-ups of conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and Hashimoto's disease. People suffer for years, dealing with chronic joint pain, persistent skin rashes, and crippling fatigue, swallowing handfuls of medication without ever realizing the culprit might be a seemingly healthy eggplant or bell pepper on their plate. Compare this mechanism to alcohol. Alcohol can cause hangovers and liver problems, but it rarely triggers such an insidious mechanism of systemic self-destruction. Besides lectins, nightshades contain another interesting compound, solanine. This glycoalkaloid acts as a natural pesticide for the plant, defending it against pests and fungi. In large quantities, solanine is poisonous. The classic example of this is green potatoes. That green tint indicates a high concentration of solanine, and consuming this type of potato is strictly off-limits. Ripe tomatoes and eggplants, of course, contain much lower levels, and this dosage is safe for the majority of people. However, in sensitive individuals, even a small amount of solanine can trigger inflammatory reactions, joint pain, and digestive issues. Many people suffering from arthritis report that their condition significantly improves when they eliminate all nightshades from their diet. This doesn't mean tomatoes cause arthritis, but they can be a powerful trigger that exacerbates existing inflammation. Think of it as pouring fuel on a fire that is already smoldering in your joints. So, why is the damage caused by these vegetables considered more insidious than the damage caused by alcohol? Because it's completely non-obvious. If you wake up with a headache after a party, you know the exact cause. If your liver starts failing after years of alcohol abuse, the connection is clear, too. But when your knees start aching, a tomato will be the very last culprit you consider. You'll blame your age, the weather, or perhaps old injuries. You'll visit the doctor, who will likely prescribe anti-inflammatory drugs that come with a whole host of side effects. And all the while, you'll continue eating your healthy salad, packed with tomatoes and peppers, essentially fueling chronic inflammation throughout your system. This is the fundamental treachery of the nightshade family. They operate stealthily, often masquerading as a vital health food, and their negative impact might not manifest until months or even years down the line. They are truly a ticking time bomb that we willingly plant inside our bodies every single day. People who should be particularly mindful of nightshades are those already dealing with autoimmune diseases, persistent gut issues, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, or chronic joint pain. For this group, temporarily removing these foods from their diet, a process known as an elimination diet, can be a true game changer. It's common to see massive improvements in well-being after just 3 to 4 weeks without tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. Aches and pains disappear, skin clears up, and energy levels spike. Now, this doesn't mean everyone needs to immediately give up these vegetables forever, but if you have unexplained health issues, trying to eliminate them from your menu for a month is a very simple and safe diagnostic tool. After all, it's better to skip the pizza and ratatouille temporarily than to rely on painkillers for the rest of your life, right? If you're generally healthy but still want to minimize the potential downsides of nightshades, here are a few simple rules to follow. First, remember that the majority of lectins and solanine are concentrated in the skin and seeds. To make nightshades much safer, try peeling your tomatoes, easily done by scoring them and quickly blanching them in boiling water and removing the seeds. This technique also applies to bell peppers. For eggplant, a good soak in salt water before cooking significantly helps reduce these compounds. Second, know that cooking dramatically reduces lectin levels. Therefore, consuming nightshades stewed, roasted, or baked is always preferable to eating them raw. A raw bell pepper tossed into your salad, for example, delivers a significant lectin load. Third, always choose fully ripened produce. Unripe green tomatoes, for instance, contain much higher levels of toxic alkaloids. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, practice moderation. There's no need to consume nightshades 3 times a day. Remember, dietary diversity is always the ultimate key to good health. So let's wrap this up. Today we tackled the sacred cows of healthy eating head on. we discovered that the humble potato can be a major sugar bomb and a source of potential carcinogens, making it worse than many foods we already avoid. We learned that sweet corn floods the liver with fructose, almost identically to alcohol, fueling chronic inflammation throughout the body. And finally, we uncovered the secrets of nightshades, tomatoes, eggplant, and peppers, explaining how their defensive proteins, lectins, can trigger joint pain and potentially aggravate autoimmune conditions. The key takeaway here is this: not everything that grows in the ground is inherently good for you. But here is the critical pivot. The issue isn't the vegetables themselves. The problem lies in the quantity we consume, how we prepare them, and our blind faith in their unconditional benefit. The damage caused by alcohol is obvious and dose-dependent. The harm from these misunderstood vegetables, however, is often hidden, masked, and has an insidious cumulative effect. The goal of this video is not to scare you or get you to cut out vegetables entirely. The real aim is to get you to think critically, analyze the information, and, most importantly, listen to your own body. Stop following dogmas blindly and start building your diet consciously and deliberately. Thank you for watching this complex topic all the way through. If this video sparked your curiosity or made you think, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future deep dives into the world of health and wellness myths. Now, I have a question for you. What other supposedly healthy foods raise red flags or cause you confusion? Let me know in the comments below. Your question might just become the topic of our very next episode. Let's figure this out together.